Hi, this is Inky35, and today I'm going to be reading out of the book of Jeremiah. What I'm going to be doing here, I'm gonna share with you guys some history on Nabonidus and the book of Jeremiah. I'm going to be reading the book of Ezekiel. Also, I'm going to explain to you the kings and their battles and what they were doing, and also the god Marduk. I'm also going to show you guys that the book of Jeremiah, as stated in the Bible, they have that it is written in, they believe it was written during Jeremiah's ministry in approximately 627 to 586 BC. And this would have been during the time of parts of Nebuchadnezzar's father's rule, which was Nabopolassar and or Nabopolassar, and and then of course during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. And interestingly, I'm going to show you that the Hebrews or the Jews had pretty much used propaganda to propagate their God as the God of their country over the gods of Babylon, which I'm going to explain how this all came about. Okay, this is an in-depth study, so I can show you when things were really written and what was going on during the time that it was written. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us over into the rituals and the ceremonies to show that these ceremonies that the Jews actually performed are the same exact Babylonian ceremonies, which were supposed to have been taught by Moses to them, which it all stems literally from Babylon. And I'm going to prove this. So first of all, if you have a Bible, you can turn to chapter 50. And the reason why I'm turning to chapter 50 is because people need to realize that, okay, first of all, this guy had asked me a very good question yesterday about Bel. And that he said that Bel had been shattered in Jeremiah 50. And people reference Bel as Marduk, but actually Enlil is also the original Bel. Okay. Now, before the Jews were captured, Jeremiah was supposed to have been giving this prophecy of what was going to come about if they did not obey the Lord. And so this was supposed to happen, like I said, during the time of Nebuchadnezzar before they were captured in 587. What happened was in 598, 597 respectively, Nebuchadnezzar had taken the king of Israel and brought him into captivity during that time with his family and his children. And because they were defiant, and Judah was left in the land. So, they tried to cause a war with Nebuchadnezzar and thought they were slick and they were going to bring in the Egyptians to war against him, and they defied him and revolted, and pretty much Nebuchadnezzar, one of the greatest kings of Babylon, and his armies pretty much just wiped them out, brought them out of there, and destroyed and sacked their cities and destroyed their walls and the temple in Jerusalem. But this all leads back to where God states that because of their disobedience, that they would go into captivity. And so this is where they go into captivity in 587 BCE, and now they are in the Babylonian learning centers. So all these people are living there. They have no land. Their land has been taken over now by the Babylonians. And now they are in the learning centers amongst many cultures that are there. So the whole reason, I just want to say, that they were put over, that they were taken over was due to the fact that they did not follow the covenant of the Lord. So what they did is they disobeyed the Lord according to their writings, and they worshiped Baal, and they worshiped the Asherahs. So because they worshiped Baals and the Asherah, which actually relates to Enlil's children, and also Asherah is Inanna, they were punished. Now, people need to recognize that these gods that I just mentioned are against the god Marduk. So, they're brought into this civilization. So, I'm going to read right here the message about Babylon in Jeremiah 50. And it says, "This is the word of the Lord spoke through Jeremiah the prophet concerning Babylon and the land of the Babylonians. Announce and proclaim among the nations, and lift up a banner and proclaim it. Keep nothing back, but say, Babylon will be captured, Bel will be put to shame, Marduk filled with terror. And her images will be put to shame, and her idols filled with terror. A nation from the north will attack her and lay waste her land, and no one will live in it. Both men and animals will flee away. In those days, at the time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God, and they will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. And they will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. My people have been lost sheep, and their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains, and they wandered over mountain and hill and forgot their own resting place. And whoever found them devoured them. Their enemies said, We are not guilty, for they sinned against the Lord, their true pasture, for the Lord, the hope of their fathers. Flee out of Babylon, leave the land of the Babylonians, and be like goats that lead the flock. For I will stir up and bring against Babylon an alliance of great nations from the land of the north, and they will take up their positions against her, and from the north she will be captured, and their arrows will be like skilled warriors who do not return empty-handed. So Babylonia will be plundered, and all who plunder her will have their fill, declares the Lord." So, this is supposed to be a prophecy of what is about to come upon Babylon. Well, I'm going to take us over to the history of the book of Jeremiah. So in the Bible, I just want to say, before I tell you this history, I want to read a little side note here in the concordance in my Bible. And it states that the nation from the north was Medo-Persia, an alliance of Media and Persia that would become the next world power. So Cyrus took the city of Babylon by surprise and brought the nation to its knees in 539 BC. And they reference Daniel 5:30 and 31. And the complete destruction of the city was accomplished by later Persian kings. Well, first of all, like I said in my second video on the Anunnaki Gods, Marduk, God of Hammurabi, Cyrus, and the Israelites, question mark, I showed in that video that the book of Daniel was not written then. The book of Daniel was written in 167 to 164 BC, respectively. It was written 400 years after the fact. Okay? So, what you would call this is called propaganda. This is what you call propaganda. So, let's take a look at the date of Jeremiah. And when was it written? It says that Jeremiah came into being over the course of half a century or so, and it was probably completed sometime during the Babylonian exile of 587 to 538 BCE, though some consider the editing of the book to have continued even later, meaning that they actually date in the Bible that it was written in 627, but yet it was really written between those times and even dated later. So what this means is that during the time that all this took place with Cyrus the Great, and the fact that this actually happened after Cyrus had already come in to Babylon and took it over. So once again, just like in the book of Daniel, they had written about the events that had happened already and put it as the future to make it a prophecy of something that already came to pass. So here's another instance, once again, just due to the dates and the scholars finding that this actually took place during the time of exile, which they were there, so they also knew about the problems with King Nabonidus and the fact that he was putting away with the worship of Marduk. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to take us over to Nabonidus' cylinder sill, which talks about this. And this is during the reign of Nabonidus, and he reigned from 556 to 539 BC. And what he's talking about here is during his reign that he was building these temples to the moon god Sin in Haran. And that Sin was the great lord and established his favorite residence in his heart. So they were having problems with the Medes. And so this is what Nabonidus says in his own cylinder sill. It states this, that in the beginning of my everlasting reign, they sent me a dream. Marduk, the great lord, and Sin, the luminary of heaven and the netherworld, stood together. Marduk spoke with me, Nabonidus, king of Babylon, carry bricks on your riding horse and rebuild the Ehulhul, and cause Sin, the great lord, to establish his residence in its midst. So it says, reverently, I spoke to the Enlil of the gods, Marduk. That temple which you ordered me to build, the Mede surrounds it, and his might is excessive. But Marduk spoke with me and said, the Mede whom you mentioned, he, his country, and the kings who march at his side will be no more. And so at the beginning of the third year, in the summer of 553, they aroused him, Cyrus, the king of Anshan, his second in rank, and he scattered the vast Median hordes with his small army. And he captures Astyages, the king of the Medes, and took him to his country as captive. And such was the word of the great Lord Marduk, and of Sin, the luminary of heaven and the netherworld, whose command is not revoked. And I feared their august command, and I became troubled, and I was worried, and my face showed signs of anxiety. I was not neglectful, nor remiss, nor careless. Well, what happened with Nabonidus and what has been written in the book of Jeremiah is that Nabonidus had put away with the worship of Marduk. And he went on and he had built this temple to his god Sin, which is Enlil's son. And he's an Assyrian god. And this is who he was worshiping, which was actually against his god, the god of the Babylonians, which was supposed to be having festivals, the Ketu festivals and all this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to Jeremiah 25. And I'm going to read you something that is really interesting about what it's stating here in Jeremiah 25. And now that we know that this was actually written during the time of Nabonidus and was written during the time of Cyrus, where they knew that Cyrus had already come in, what they did was, like I said, this is propaganda. They ended up putting this in as a prophecy of what was to come for their own people, to show that their God had the supreme power. Yet the God that actually did this, according to the kings, was the God over Babylon, who is the one who took out Nabonidus and brought in Marduk, according to both kings. King Nabonidus, King Cyrus. So here is what it states in the Bible about what the Lord says in Jeremiah. I'm going to start out at Jeremiah 25:7. And this is where the Lord is telling the people that what they have done. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll start at 25:4, because to bring it all together here. What has happened is they disobeyed the Lord. So this is why they end up in Babylon. And I want you to listen to this really closely, what it's saying here. And this is, of course, after the fact, because obviously Nebuchadnezzar is already passed away by the time this was written. So it says, "And though the Lord has sent all of his servants, the prophets, to you again and again, you have not listened or paid any attention. And they said, Turn now, each of you, from your evil ways and your evil practices, and you can stay in the land that the Lord gave to you and your fathers forever and ever. And do not follow other gods to serve and worship them, and do not provoke me to anger with what your hands have made, then I will not harm you. But you did not listen to me, declares the Lord, and you have provoked me with what your hands have made, and you have brought harm to yourselves. Therefore, the Lord Almighty says this, because you have not listened to my words, I will summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, declares the Lord, and I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants and against all the surrounding nations. So this is an interesting thought, that right here it states, because they have not listened to the Lord's words, that it says he will summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, declares the Lord. And I will bring them against this land. So right here we have the Lord of the Hebrews, stating that Nebuchadnezzar is his servant. And he is not a Hebrew, he is a Babylonian. Yet the Lord that the Babylonians worship and that Nebuchadnezzar reverenced and was the servant of was Marduk.